Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the latest installment of Inferior's Merge Weekly Workshops. We have an exciting session in store for you all today with a special guest that will be speaking. Today's session is about running multiple validators and staking as a service. I'm Tyreek Houston, a senior UX researcher at Infura, and I'll be hosting today's session along with a few of my colleagues. So as you can see, today we have a full packed agenda, and our goal of this session is to give you a brief overview of validators and the complexities that can come with being one as the merge approaches, especially if you're running multiple validators, along with an overview of codified staking setup. We will also do a quick recap of where the Ethereum community and Infura currently is as the merge approaches. And we're also going to leave ample time for Q&A. So we'll do our best to cover all of the material while still leaving you all with time to get your questions answered. So let's start with a few introductions. So on the call with me presenting today, I have a few of my colleagues, and all of us are part of a larger team working for Infura and for Consensus. We will all cover different parts of today's presentation, and you'll be seeing us doing so, along with another colleague of mine, Darina, who will be answering your questions in the chat. So as I said, I'm Tyreek Houston, the senior researcher here with Infura, and I'll leave it to everyone else to introduce themselves, starting from left to right. Kuan, do you want to start?
Sure. Hey, I'm Kuhan Thavanantha. I'm product lead for Codify Staking, which is our institutional staking as a service here at Consensus.
Hi, folks. My name is Gagan Prakash. I'm one of the product managers on the Infura team. Happy to be here. Looking forward to this presentation and your questions.
Hi, all. I'm Tom Hay.
And that was Tom Hay, folks. Hello, my name is Drina Ventura. I'm the portfolio marketing lead here at Consensus, and I'm so excited to be here today. Tom Hay and I will be sharing links to our resources, our survey, and we'll be answering your questions throughout the presentation here. Tyreek, take it away.
All right, thanks y'all for the intros. Tom, hopefully you get the microphone settled out, or it could have been, an issue on my part because I'm not muted. So before we get started, a bit of housekeeping rules before we jump into anything. So please go ahead and help us out by clicking the green button you see below the video and filling out our community survey. We will use the data in order to further refine and improve these sessions to meet your needs. Also, please use the Ask a Question button to ask questions. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible that are relevant to the merge. If a question is not relevant to the merge, you can always join us on our monthly community calls, which are the last Tuesday of each month on Crowdcast at 3 p.m. UTC, which is 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific time. This call is being recorded and it can be replayed again here on Crowdcast. We also aim to share both the recordings of this call and the deck to the Consensus Merge knowledge base before the end of the week. So, as well as emailing these resources out to our users. And make sure you scan the QR code as well. So before we get into today's validator and staking as a service topics, we're going to quickly go through a few merge updates. So as you can see in our timeline, the development of proof of stake Ethereum has been going through a lot of series of forks, network upgrades, and deployments. And we are now in the box all the way to the right of the timeline. The final testnet deployment for Ethereum's transition from proof of work to proof of stake will be the Gurley testnet merge. And as you all probably are aware, the Gurley merge is planned for tomorrow, Wednesday, August 10th at 5 p.m. UTC, which is 1 p.m. Eastern and 10 a.m. Pacific time. Again, It will be based on the total terminal difficulty, or TTD for short, mentioned by Tim Bako in a GitHub comment. So this is a very important milestone, and we expect a decision to be made on the mainnet merge date following the Gurley testnet merge. So we recommend that you use this upcoming Gurley merge to test out your staking setup if you have one. And at this point, we as an Ethereum community have successfully merged the Ropstein testnet back on June 8th, as well as the Sepolia testnet on July 6th. Additionally, many shadow forks have been occurring in order to test a variation of client configurations in anticipation for the merge. So we now have one more testnet to merge, which is Gurley. And the total terminal difficulty for the merge of Gurley will be determined very, very soon and shared out. So if everything proceeds as planned after the Gurley merge, Ethereum's mainnet will have the total terminal difficulty set, and the Ethereum mainnet merge will occur. So after the merge occurs, Gurley and Sepolia will be the supported testnets, and you will have access to those API endpoints for both on Infura. Ropstein, Rakimbi, and Coven will be deprecated after the merge, and we will give all of our users a 2 weeks notice before deprecating those from Infura. Primont will also be deprecated and will be removed from Infura's UI. So with that, I will now pass it on to my colleague, Kuan, our special guest, to talk about validators and staking as a service.
Great, thanks, Tyreek. So why don't I just quickly talk through what I'm going to speak about, and then we'll dig in. A quick review of what are validators and stakers and the roles they play in a proof of stake blockchain. Then we'll dig into codify staking itself, how we are structured and why we're structured that way. And then I'm going to close with the impact of the merge on that structure and some of the challenges we've had to address over the last, I guess, few months getting ready for next month, fingers crossed. So let's begin. Next slide. Oh, great. Okay. So just talking through the diagram. So there we have a blockchain being constructed in a sequence as we'd expect. With proof of work, of course, then you have miners. These miners compete by playing a game in order to produce the next block. With proof of stake, we have validators, and those validators on Ethereum collaborate in order to produce the next block as the blockchain itself increases in length. I think some things to take note of in a permissionless network like Ethereum, those validators have to provide some security or stake to ensure that they're honest. We move slides, Tariq. Next slide, please. I'm not, oh no, sorry, go back. Oh no, this is the right slide, sorry. So who can stake? Who are these stakers? Frankly, the whole point is that anyone can stake. You can be individuals, you can be groups of people who trust each other. I will talk a little bit more about that in a moment. You can be companies, you can be cats, you can be other animals. It really doesn't matter. Anyone can stake. Important points to note is that Ethereum requires 32 ETH to stake a validator. And I guess one point to call out here is that that number was arrived upon way back in the day when Ethereum wasn't in the thousands, and 32 ETH was considered a reasonable bar to reach in order to ensure honesty as a staker. Now, I've not checked the latest price, but it's still a lot. So one thing I wanted to just focus on the left-hand side of this diagram, you can see a single staker fulfilling the stake for a particular validator, Validator 7. On the right-hand side, you have multiple stakers all pushing their ETH into a single validator together. Now, that can take different models in today's world. That can be through a centralized body like an exchange or a custodian, and they'll manage the whole pooling together of different amounts of ETH such that you can then trigger a validator. You also have bodies that use smart contracts to manage all of the pooling, and then they manage the whole process around that, and then they trigger the stake and also distribute the rewards. Next slide, please. So rewards, and now this is of course why people might stake. There's also the more altruistic motivation around supporting Ethereum's transition to proof of stake. There's the huge impact on the energy cost borne by proof of work versus proof of stake. So there's a lot of benefits to be taken there. However, in a non-altruistic space, validators earn rewards. They earn rewards by attesting to and proposing new blocks. Now, one of the things post-merge that will happen is that when a validator is selected to propose a block, they will also have the opportunity to earn those priority fees or those tips of transactions, just like miners do today. Now, there are risks that are borne by validators. The main risk is essentially if they're considered dishonest by the protocol, then the protocol will reduce the value of their stake and also remove them from the active validator pool, i.e. Disable their ability to continue to validate and participate. A much smaller penalty is incurred if a validator happens to be offline or doesn't respond to the duties requested by the protocol. A small penalty is applied, but they're not removed, and they can easily pick that back up by basically being active again and responding to requests. So that's kind of a quick recap. Hopefully all of that was familiar to you. Now let's talk a little bit more specifically about codified staking and operating at scale. Next slide, please. So here are just some general numbers on codified staking. I'm just probably going to spend a lot of this slide with my head on my hands, touching wood. So we run around 10,000 validators today. It's very easy when operating at scale to make a mistake. And actually, I'd suggest that all of the slashing events we've seen to date, I think it's at about 180 right now, since Genesis in December 2020, I'd suggest almost all of those have been through a little mistake when deploying or changing infrastructure or setup, rather than any act of malice. So even though we have that many validators, we've had no slashing or significant downtime. And we've spent much of the last 18-19 months essentially adding more resilience through being multi-client now, Teku and Lighthouse, being multi-region, so across Asia, Europe, and America, and are planning to be multi-cloud by the end of the summer. All of those things essentially allow us to be more reliable in terms of responding to duties. And of course, look, 10,000 validators is not a big amount in the scope of the huge amounts that have been staked to date, but it's still significant enough for me to worry about when, as a product lead for this business. And I guess one final thing to call out, because of this concern around operational risk, we've also engaged with going through a system and organization controls assessment, or SOC, so that we can be sure that the ways in which we are doing things, whether it be the constant upgrading across the platform, or even when we change our infrastructure and the constructs within or our architecture, we can make sure we're doing that in a very safe and secure way. So how will we structure itself? So I think one of the key things that we focused on during implementation in our architecture was this idea of separation of concerns and going left to right. So the data domain kind of does what it says on the tin. It's wholly focused on scraping information off both the execution layer and the consensus layer so that we not only understand properly the state of all of those validators, but also can ensure that our customers are able to access near real-time reporting to understand how much rewards they've accrued, any penalties they might have incurred as a validator's sort of missing something as they're going along. So that's one section that is only connected to the customer domain. That customer domain holds all of our customer information, surprise, surprise. It also is the only part of our infrastructure that has external connectivity open to it, whether it be through an API or through a UI. And then finally, we have the validator infrastructure. And that is the where all the secrets and all the key work actually takes place. And you can see here, we have completely focused on ensuring we're as secure as we possibly can be and that we're as resilient as we possibly can be. Next slide, please. So here we are digging in a little bit further into our validator infrastructure itself. This construct is essentially duplicated across all of the multiple regions and clouds, as per I said earlier. And just to talk through this in a little bit more detail, we have all our private keys are held in key vaults. They are generated in bulk and directly injected into those key vaults. So I think that's quite an important security element as well, because essentially we don't respond to demand. So someone stakes with us, we don't then go away and generate the necessary keys to serve that stake. All of that is done beforehand, and all we have to do when they stake is simply provide them with the appropriate payload to allow them to then deliver their deposit into the formal deposit contract. Alongside the key vault, we have our Web3 signer. This is the remote signer that we use. It's developed in-house here at Consensus. And that's where we sign all of the duties that are called for from our validators by the protocol. And then that Web3 signer, in turn, is connected across our Lighthouse, Beacon Chain or Consensus layer clients, and our Teku clients. So that's how we're constructed right now. What I'm going to talk about now, you can move to the next slide, thanks Tariq, is what's been the impact for us, on us, of the merge that's coming in the next few weeks. So broad brush, quick summary. It's had an impact on the way in which the whole architecture of the platform itself is configured by introducing new clients into the space, execution layer clients. We also have had to figure out ways to handle priority fees for customers. And then finally, in order to maximize the rewards for our customers, we've had to understand how and we should implement MEV for them. So I'm going to dig into each of these in turn over the next few slides. So this slide here talks about how our configuration has changed. As I mentioned, in each of our validator infrastructure, we have thousands of keys. Each of those thousands of keys are mapped to multiple validator clients to give us some resilience. And then that's mapped to a single consensus layer client. And then finally, and this is the new element, that consensus layer client is mapped on a one-to-one basis to an execution layer client. So one of the challenges we've had for this is, for example, implementing Besu has had some problems for us, but we're overcoming those within a kind of enterprise but connected to mainnet space, across peering and opening up the correct sorts of ports to ensure we don't create a security risk, but yet allow sufficient peering across our nodes. Next slide, please. The fee recipient. So just a quick reminder, the fee recipient is a value that all of you stakers who have staked today, you should be thinking about setting this parameter across your consensus layer clients or at your individual validator levels. And this is the execution layer address to which any priority fees will be rewarded to should your validator be chosen to propose a block. Now, Codify Staking's customers have essentially, surprise, surprise, come up with multiple ways in which they want to do this. The first being, and this is the majority actually, they just want to be able to set a fee recipient at the customer level and then that apply across all of the validators that they have staked with us to date and which they might stake in the future. The next one has been a bit more complicated, where they've requested that they be able to apply fee recipient addresses on an individual validator basis on a many-to-many basis. So they not only wanted to look back across their however many thousands of validators they might have staked with us and essentially say X goes to A, Y goes to G, Z goes to K, and do that across all of those. So we've had to support that. Finally, then looking forward, we've had a request to allow stakers to select their fee recipient every time they stake. So we've amended our API and our user interface to allow customers to essentially insert the address they wish to use when they stake the ETH for that particular transaction. Now, what's been okay, we can move on. I think the one final thing to call out on the fee recipient was the second one actually led us to then go and engage with all of the client teams, Teku and Lighthouse in particular, because they're the ones that we used, and ensure that they actually did support individual validator key level mapping across to different fee recipients, because previously I think the intention was for that to be set at the individual validator client level. So I think that's been a good driver for the whole ecosystem that functionality is now in place. Now, please, thanks, Tariq. Finally, MEV. So without getting into all the discussions and potential controversy around MEV, the truth is MEV does exist as we speak today, and most of our customers, if not all of them, are expecting to benefit from what any MEV they might be able to accrue as and when their validators get selected to propose a block. As a result, we're proposing to run the MEV Boost sidecar across our infrastructure. And as I mentioned, that will essentially maximize the rewards for our customers. And there's a sequence diagram here. It's pretty simple. It's a simplified version of what actually happens. But there you can see the main parties in play, where you have the validator, you have the MEV Boost sidecar that sits alongside the consensus layer client, and that connects to a relay, and to which builders then send blocks. I think one of the things to call out that is interesting and is different should you decide not to run the MEV Boost sidecar, if you're just pointing at your execution layer for a block as and when your validator gets chosen, then those priority fees essentially are introduced as a change of state directly into your fee recipient address, just as they might be today for a miner should they get to mint the next block. If you're using the MEV Boost sidecar, however, that reward essentially is a transaction that is sent from the builder to the fee recipient address of the validator, and it's an ordinary transaction. And as it stands, whilst we've raised an issue with the Flashbots team to figure out an on-chain mechanism to identify that transaction, the current approach is essentially to make that transaction the last transaction in the block. So if your validator key gets selected to propose a block, its fee recipient address will receive its rewards as the last transaction in that block. And I think I'm in good time. That's kind of what I had planned to cover. I think I can hand back to Tyreek, and maybe, I don't know whether you had a few more things to cover, and then we move to Q&A.
Yep, we have a few more things to talk about, but thank you so much for discussing everything that you talked about, Kuhan. So now let's talk about what's next in this series. So as you all may or may not know, we are doing these merge series of workshops on a weekly basis, and today's session was about validators and staking as a service, our 5th workshop. So if you missed the first 4, please go back to our Crowdcast link and you'll be able to see the recordings of the past workshops. If you're a solo staker specifically, you should definitely check out our 2nd workshop, which was just for solo stakers, and also it covered what you need to do to get ready for the merge. Michael Wooler, Infura's co-founder, along with Tom Hay, our senior product manager, went through post-merge changes that solo stakers need to make, and it will also be super useful to help you get ready as the merge approaches. Our 3rd workshop is also something you might want to check out. I would definitely recommend. Gagan, our host for that workshop, along with subject matter expert Simon Brown and Nick Hewitt, they went through MEV impacts on the Ethereum network currently, as well as how that will change post-merge. On August 2nd, we had our technical workshop, once again, aimed at solo stakers, which went into detail about how the execution client and the consensus client work together in order to produce and validate blocks with the live demo and walkthrough. So for all of you who are more technical, that is something you definitely want to check out and revisit. Next week will be our last workshop. I know. We'll be wrapping things up on August 16th, and that call will be focused on dApps and smart contract development considerations. So please make sure you tune in next week for our last workshop. So next, I'll pass it over to my colleague Gagan, who will be sharing some resources with you like we do every call to keep you up to date with everything that's going on.
Thanks, Tariq. Hey, folks. So we, just as always, we want to make sure that you have all the resources. You can, access to a lot of resources so you can understand what's going on and stay on top of and updated with the latest in the merge. Firstly, the Infura blog, it's a great place to be plugged in and see everything that we are doing around the merge at Infura and at Consensus. We have these workshops, the recordings for which are available at Crowdcast. We've got office hours, and we also do weekly Twitter spaces where we recap each one of these workshops. So make sure to check out either the recordings or the Twitter space calls. The blog will give you those links, so you can check out the blog and get to those links from there. We also have a consensus-wide merge knowledge base, which we are using to help keep the community up to date with all the information about the merge, from high-level overview information to really detailed technical information. And then finally, Kuhan spent a lot of time talking about Codify staking. So if you're curious and want to learn more about that, please check out their website, and that'll inform you more about staking, DeFi, how the staking rewards are generated, and you can also explore their staking services a little bit in more detail. Tariq, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. This slide really covers a lot of the resources that the Ethereum Foundation has, and there's a great set of resources here. One of the things which is coming up is that on August 12th, there is a community call for the merge, and the Zoom link can be found on the foundation's GitHub link. You can also subscribe to their calendar on GitHub so that you never miss a call with them and always have the opportunity to rewatch any calls that you may have missed. And again, we'll be, I think Dorina just shared that link, so that's great. The Ethereum Foundation also has this great website covering the merge and what different stakeholders need to do to get ready. So that's the first link on the right side on the slide. There's also a mega merge resource list, which compiles many credible and reputable resources and the complete history of the merge all in one place. So if you're curious to see all the testing and the forks and that has been done, you can go there and you can see that. And then lastly, there's really the Ethereum Launchpad, which walks you through how to become a validator on the Ethereum network in a really, really user-friendly way. This was a slide which was actually, this is a resource that Michael Wooler actually brought up in a I guess three workshops ago when he was talking about how to be a validator, and he found that resource to be really helpful. I and Tariq ended up checking it out afterwards as well, and it's super useful, so please do check that out. Tariq, next slide. And we've got a call to action for you guys. If you haven't already, please click that green button around how prepared are you, fill out the survey here. That will take you to our community survey. By you answering these questions, it really helps us in understanding what your concerns are, what information you're looking to learn about. And a lot of the materials in these workshops and what we have on the blog, we prepare that based upon the survey responses that we receive. So please do check out that survey and give us your feedback. It helps us do a better job. So that feedback is super powerful, and we will continue to use that to understand where you want to go. And I guess at this point, that's pretty much all I have as far as resources is concerned. I'm gonna hand it to Tom to run the Q&A, and I believe we have a decent amount of time, so looking forward to getting into the Q&A. Tom.
Thanks, Gagan. Great. So we're going to just jump into the Q&A. We have a great number of questions here. It looks like 15 have come in. So I am going to throw the first question to Kuhan, and this is just asking, does Codify staking have its own base node instances as an execution layer? Is it using inferior endpoints? I think there's just a question on kind of going back to what you were saying on the one-to-one consensus layer to execution layer combo. And I think you covered it, but maybe if you just want to clarify that. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. So I probably spoke too fast. We don't use any inferior endpoints. We do have our own Besu instances on a one-to-one basis with each of our consensus layer clients. And actually, our intention is to run both Besu and Geth so that we have good diversity across our platform. And obviously, I know there's a much more focus now on the current lack of diversity on the execution layer, but I'm sure that will improve over time. And I guess our end goal is to make sure that we ourselves are also kind of set up with some resilience should an issue be found.
Cool. And then just thank you for that answer, Kuhan. And then just to sort of I know we've repeated this a lot, but we'll do it again. Similar to what Kuhan and Kuhan's team are doing. Just a good note, if you're a solo staker, for example, this is just to sort of amplify the idea that to be live at the merge, you have to be running a EL and CL combo 1-to-1. You have to have a JSON Web Token secret for secure communication and authentication between the two. And then finally, you have to set a fee recipient address in order to get that the unburnt fee tips and any MEV. So, and I know that the Codify staking team is done that, takes care of that. And that's just general good guidance for solo stakers as well. So just make sure you do that. Some of our prior sessions talk about that. Another question that I'm going to throw to you, Kuhan, and I dropped in some documentation to ethhub.io here, but with base fees being burnt and only the fee tips being rewarded to validators in any MEV, I'll add that into this question. With the proof of stake merge, how is it that new ETH enters the system? Obviously, because block rewards are changing from what they were under proof of work. But is there still block rewards for validators?
So it's a great question. So there are still block rewards for validators, only when they get to propose a block. They don't get, well, they do get some block rewards, of course, for a testing. However, I guess points to note, that block reward is significantly, it's a hugely lower, I think it's 0.2 ETH per block, about averages. And right now it's 2 ETH per block. So that's a significant change lower. In terms of circulating, I think that was a word used in that question. It's important to note that that block reward will not be circulating until withdrawals are implemented. So those block rewards, new ETH, quote unquote, will go straight into validators on the consensus layer and are locked away just as they are today and will not be available until withdrawals are enabled whenever the Shanghai release, I think it's called right now, is scheduled and delivered. Not sure when that's going to be. People, I guess, are hoping end of the year, Q1 2023. So what we're left with is all the ETH in play today is going to be the ETH that will be in play post-merge. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, actually.
But just to sort of expand on that, the unburnt fee tips in any MEV is instantly available for any validator, right? So if they earn that, that is not being locked up. That is instantly available.
Absolutely. Sorry, I should have emphasized that. Yes, those priority fees that exist today on the execution layer will be delivered at that point in time into the validator's fee recipient address and be available for them to continue to do what they will.
Perfect. So a question that's kind of come up, but and I think we'll kind of just address it head on. There's been questions about, because of some Twitter chatter, about like, will there be a potentially like a fork at the merge? This idea, like similar to after the DAO hack and the DAO fork, like Ethereum Classic. You know, just from our perspective, we believe that the community should follow the Ethereum roadmap as it is published today and in being communicated, and go ahead with the merge of proof of stake once that TTD is set and reached. And obviously, like, this series is very much focused on explaining that and preparing everyone and solo stakers and other people who are maybe interested in being able to do that. So that is our position. Let's follow the Ethereum roadmap. This has been worked on for years and years and years. Is it possible that there could be a fork? Like, of course, there could be forks today, right? But I think like the community has laid out a vision for Ethereum, and it's an exciting vision. There is a great talk that Vitalik Buterin gave at ETHCC about the merge and then the next steps following on. And that gets me really excited about, the merge is a step in the evolution of Ethereum, and it will continue to evolve. So I don't know if Kuhan, there's anything that you want to add there, or anything that you maybe want to point out that you're excited about just with that, thinking of that post-merge roadmap that has now been articulated.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you've just said. I think as I kind of touched on during my talk, I'm really excited about us no longer using huge amounts of energy to run the Ethereum network. If we are building a network that will support kind of future transactions and Web3 and for the future, it's got to be sustainable. And I think everyone today is aware of the constraints around energy. That has an impact on every aspect of our lives. So I think this is important. I believe in it. I think it's something we must do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, to quote Coogan Brennan from last week, like in many ways, even though this is impacting the, Ethereum and by extension, blockchain and Web3 community, in some ways it is very much a moon landing moment of showing like how a group can decentrally organize and choose to move systems and sort of in which is something that in this era that we live in is like a really important example for society to see. So it's not just the excitement around our ability to do this for our ecosystem, but actually to me also the potential impacts and example that's being told for other coordination that will happen maybe even on a global planetary scale.
Yeah, I love that. Makes lots of sense.
So here's an interesting one. And I think I'm going to interpret this, but the question was like, do all validators accept the merge? And I think what that means is like, what do, if you're running an ELCL combo in order to be ready for the merge, AKA, which the fork would, I think, is actually called the Bellatrix fork. Maybe you can, Kuhan, you can just generally talk about like, once the TTD is set for Ethereum mainnet merge, I'm assuming I'm going to sort of outline what happened with Gurley, and maybe you can just sort of give any nuance or anything else. So with Gurley, we had on August 4th, the Bellatrix fork for Gurley go into place. And so before that, there were all the, there were client releases that were happening that week, that updates to the client software, both the EL and CL. And then people made those updates. And then now their clients are looking for that TTD, which is like 107,900,000. It's something like that. And then so once that is reached, that total terminal difficulty, that is when the merge of Prater and Gurley happen to make what would now be the Gurley testnet. So, Gurley testnet goes from I believe it's like a click proof of authority testnet or like a proof of authority testnet to a proof of stake testnet. And then my assumption is that like this is going to be similar for mainnet, that there will be the Bellatrix fork for mainnet, that everyone will do client updates for their execution layer, their consensus layer, and then it'll be looking for that TTD, and then the merge will happen at that point. Is that kind of what you're thinking? And then is there anything that, how do you, keep aware of like when those releases happen? What's kind of the best practices that you all are following that maybe would be helpful for a solo staker watching this call?
Sure. So I think in terms of keeping track is just being part of those communities, whether it be Tekus or Lighthouses or the Ethereum Foundation itself. Yes, we're keeping very close track of that. I think the current proposal is that Bellatrix for mainnet will happen about 10 to 12 days rather than 6 to 7 days, as it was for Gurley. So yeah, that's so September 7th, 8th, something like that. So that will be decided after tomorrow. I think one thing that actually to call out is that post the merge on mainnet, any voluntary exit message that was signed pre-Altair will no longer be valid. So if you've signed and stored those away, just in case something bad happens to your validator key, then once the merge happens, I recommend you sign a new one and go through the same process so that will then be valid for you going forward.
Cool. Another question here for you, Kuhan. Is there anywhere, if folks want to get any sort of resource, just like if they're interested in potentially, they're deciding between solo staking, maybe they are solo staking, or if they're thinking about, hey, what's like, I'd love to talk more to codify staking. I'm someone who wants to do that. Like, what's sort of the thing that you would sort of point them to as like a good sort of starting point, if there's a link that you want to share or anything like that?
Sure. I think someone already shared our kind of to codify staking's webpage, and there's a call to action. There's a way for you to connect to us directly. I guess in terms of the kinds of customers that we currently engage with, those are institutions, so companies, organizations. We also do have a minimum amount of ETH that we expect our customers to stake of 1,000 ETH. But if you clear all of those, and we also have a simple KYC process conducted by our legal team, once all that is passed, we can onboard you very quickly onto our platform, and you can stake away. Yeah, I hope that made sense.
Great. And then another great question. Thank you for asking this, Mario. I think this is going to clear up a bunch of misconceptions that folks might have. Why is there a hard requirement for a one-to-one CL-EL combo for a validator? The reason is because that is how the protocol is designed. So in past sessions, definitely this is a plug to rewatch those past sessions, we talk about the 3 APIs that exist post-merge. The existing Ethereum JSON RPC API, we're now calling the execution layer API. The beacon chain API can also be called the consensus layer API. So that's when you hear us use that EL-CL terminology. But there's a third API, and that is the engine API. The engine API allows the consensus layer to drive the execution layer in pulling transactions out of the mempool and building them into a block to be proposed. And ideally, it will be a valid block, right? Because we want valid blocks, so that way everyone gets their rewards and there's no slashing, and the process is playing out as designed. But if an invalid block is proposed, like that is why we have the attesters, we have these checks on it, and that's why there is slashing. The protocol is not designed to have a one-to-many CL-EL. It just is not designed that way. I don't know if there's anything else you want to expand upon with that, Kuhan.
I mean, I guess we should remember the initial kind of design thinking around proof of stake, which was to encourage decentralization and to remove the need for these huge pieces of hardware and essentially enable someone to stake from home. And I'm saying that as someone who operates as, frankly, a centralizing staking as a service, but that was a whole different market and different objective for that. But yeah, I think that we should remember where Ethereum was trying to get to with this.
Awesome. Great questions. Thank you everyone for asking. A few more, and then we'll wrap up. But if you have more questions, get them in. We still have 11 minutes left. There is a question just about, is the merge going to have an effect on non-fungible tokens in smart contracts? This is a great question. It's actually the whole topic of next week is on dApp developers, smart contract developers. Like, what's the impact? I think to not give away, we're not trying to hide anything from and be like, oh, you got to come next session. The short of it, that the too long didn't read, but we'll get into the details, is that there are impacts to block structure. There are changes to block structure. So we are seeing that, if users were, for example, using certain opcodes as a source of on-chain randomness, those opcodes, some are changing, right? And so you need to be aware of this if you're a dApp developer and really be intentional. And also finality is different, right? Like this idea, and we'll get more into it, but literally at the JSON RPC API like spec for the EL, there's going to be changes to some of the parameters in the API, in those calls, those methods that you make. So we'll get into this idea, but like unsafe head versus safe head. The reality is that like, obviously with the, Ethereum, a big thing was like probabilistic finality, but how that probabilistic finality plays out in proof of stake is, I guess the easiest way that I would say it, it's much more rapid, and so a block is like finalized much faster in proof of stake Ethereum. So there are some changes, but largely the execution layer remains the way it is today for the most part, outside of those changes which we're going to highlight. And so it's important to be aware of those subtleties, but largely the execution layer is going to remain the same. And we'll talk about block structure, but ultimately that EL block, that execution payload, essentially is just slotting in to the overall like beacon chain block. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add there, Kuhan, about your understanding of it, but there are some things that smart contract developers absolutely need to be aware of, but largely most how the EL works, other than the proof of work aspect, is largely the same.
Yeah, no, not much else to add. One of the things we've experienced is that some of our on-chain reporting based off the consensus layer clients, maybe this is connected to what you've already said, Tom, so apologies, has changed and changes with the fork, with the Bellatrix fork. And those things you have to keep an eye on, especially if you have dApps or whatever relying on that information. But yeah, I think by design, execution layer was not meant to change much.
Perfect. We have a couple more questions here. Just in general, we'll kind of go over this again, but we always love this question. When is the merge going to happen? I think, as we said, Gurley merge this week. And then after that, as Kuhan alluded to, there will be the setting of the TTD for the Ethereum mainnet merge. And along with that comes before that, we'll have to have like Bellatrix would happen prior to hitting that TTD. So I think it's fair to say over the course of this month, we will know the TTD at which the mainnet merge is going to occur. And one could have, with some conjecture, say that like, given that today is August 9th and that the Gurley merge has not happened as of yet, but when it happens and sort of playing that out, it looks like September is in play as the month in which the merge will occur. And I think that is as precise as I feel comfortable being.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Well, let's wait until tomorrow.
All right. I'm going to take, I think, at least two more questions. This is great. Wow. Like at least 25 minutes worth of questions. We love this. The next one was about, just like, how do we ensure that security is, let me make sure I got this right, but what defense and protection advantages does your project have that can safely participate in the server? I think you're meaning like literally the the idea of like client server architecture and like the Ethereum client as a server, and how can we make sure that like it is safe from hackers, from exploits? So two-part question. I think two answers here. I'll start off. Next week, we said is our last week. There is a possibility that we might announce a 7th session where we actually talk about QAing the merge and actually get in depth on this about like, how do we know this? So, but the sort of short answer is there's a lot of work from a lot of community members going on to do this. There's a lot of work at Infura. As Tariq mentioned, shadow forks is a big way of testing out the various client combos to understand, you know, what happens if there's a bug in one beacon execution layer and consensus layer client combo, and like how would that be addressed and deal with that. So like all of that is happening. That is the point of doing all these shadow forks. And then obviously this Gurley merge is a perfect time to test out your staking setup itself. Like if that is a good time to participate. Kuhan, is there anything that you want to add just in terms of like how you think about, you know, this sort of information?
I mean, I guess there was a touch on security, I think, in the question. Yeah, we spend a lot of time focused on that. How do we make sure, how do we address it? We have a lot of automated controls and monitoring and protection that wraps the entire platform, as well as, and I think I touched on this, very carefully constructed processes that meet these kinds of standards that are out there in the industry. And then finally, very strong control over who actually has access to which parts of the platform. So I guess those sorts of 3 elements: control who has access, automated monitoring and kind of protection, and then finally, very careful processes and operations themselves.
Cool. Thank you for that, Kuhan. Okay, we're going to do the last 3 like super quick. Do you believe the roadmap of ETH will take 4 years for 100K transactions per second, or take 2+ years? We are not going to estimate timelines. I'm so focused more on, you know, what October 1st looks like than anything else related to 4 years from now. So pass. When on the merge, this is a great one though. When the merge goes off, will we be online? Is like the network offline? So actually, no. What happens at that TTD is like literally the execution payload, proof of work essentially like drops away, and the execution payload effectively enters into the beacon chain block at that point. So in many ways, the merge is like it's almost like a change in block type or like block structure at that TTD, and everything stays like, there's no like going offline to upgrade. It's just like at that point, the protocol changes, and then the next block that's created is created via proof of stake mechanisms.
And it's, sorry to add, it's really cool. Oh, now I'm getting a bit geeky, but it's really cool in a blockchain, in a beacon chain explorer. So the consensus layer explorer, you look at the block before the merge, no transaction tab. You look at the block after, there's a transaction tab, and there are all the transactions.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah. Okay, last one. Can you share some resources to understand total terminal difficulty properly? Great question. It looks like Tariq dropped into the chat some information from the community call where Tim Byko really gets into it. So given that we have tens of seconds left, we're not going to be able to do it justice. Check out that resource. It's worth a look. So that's it for the Q&A. Tariq, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for joining and tuning in for today's 5th Merge Workshop. Thank you, all of my guests, for tuning in, Gagan, Tom, Kuhan, and Darina. Make sure that everybody in the audience, please hit the green button to fill out our community survey. The more we learn about what you need, the better we can fine-tune and support you as the merge approaches. Really great questions during the Q&A session. Really thought-provoking and really insightful answers from both Tom and Kuhan. With that, it is now 1 p.m. time to close. Before we wrap things up, is there any closing comments or words of wisdom that you all want to share?
Not really. Get ready for tomorrow, I guess I would say. Tomorrow's going to be exciting.
Informed.
Gurley merge should be great. We're excited for it. And then would love to see all the smart contract developers, dApp developers back here same time next week. Walk through some code on screen tutorials. Going to be fun talking about block structure. If you are a dApp developer, we have made you wait. I'm sorry, but now we're going to give you the goods. So come next week. It's going to be fun.
And thank you, Tyreek,
All
for
right, thank y'all.
hosting.
See y'all next week.